And welcome back to the Dominator, everybody. I'm your host, Billy Musio, and today with me, I'm joined by a special guest, James Brimacombe. You know him as Eagles Inside the Bestball Streets. He is a contributor for Football Guys. He has his own site at bestballrankings.com. He is a multiple underdog finalist in multiple bestball contests. You cannot join a underdog best ball draft without seeing him in the streets. And over at the Football Guys site, they just released a best ball guide that's over 60 pages, and he just contributed to 20% or more of this project. Welcome to the podcast, James. Always a pleasure to have you on and to tap into that best ball mind.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been a while since I've been doing these podcasts again, so it's nice to share some thoughts, and hopefully it's valuable to somebody out there.
Get you back in the swing of things here. Well, I'd love to talk best ball. We're in that time of year, right? We're in that lull between the NFL draft around the corner. People are still looking for their fix and get their drafts in. It's too little too early for a lot of folks for season long. So what do? We attack the best ball street. So love to get your insights on this. Having multiple leagues that you have finished inside the finals at Underdog. First of all, that's a great achievement. For those of you who don't know, it is very hard to get to the finals in any contest in Underdog. And James here has done it pretty consistently. So let's talk about structure. Let's talk about best ball structure. What is your initial thought on best ball structure and kind of the do's and don'ts in your opinion?
Yeah, there's so many ins and outs of it, right? So, for one, I right now they have the Superflex out there on Underdog. I kind of more prefer like the standard, and I draft such a high volume, so it's almost automatic for me. Like I could enter 3 or 4 at a time, and I kind of know where players are going to go, where they're going to land, what kind of stacks I could get, who's going to follow me. Kind of, you could predict like the draft as it goes. So that plays a big part of how I attack these. Then structure is just, I mean, you got the roster structure where you only start so in best ball, you only start so many players each week. Kind of does it for you, but these tournaments are so they're top heavy, and it's almost like 4 contests in one, where you have the first 12 weeks or 14 weeks, and then you go week 15, 16, and 17. They're separate. So I'm thinking a lot about that kind of stuff. I used to not think about that as much. So I used to be more, hey, I just want all these guys just to get me to advance and give me a chance. But now I've kind of like evolved gradually. So I've been doing best ball for like 6 years. So it's been something I've had to learn each year. Each year I'm learning new things. I love listening to the whole community. Like there's best ball community just growing massively. People have their strong opinions, strong takes, how they think you can beat a game. But that's the beauty of best ball. I don't think it's solved, and I don't think it will be solved for at least a couple of years. So I'm going to keep firing all off season here once again, and I think we're all on level grounds. So that's what I'm excited about. Structure, yeah, you want to find what works for you. If you're new to best ball, draft like 5-10 teams, and then kind of go back and analyze what you've done there and what the other drafters have done, and then kind of work out a plan from there. How you want to attack your season. So yeah, just basic stuff, to be honest.
So you mentioned, looking at pass through and trying to get to the next phase of the tournament. And you mentioned weeks 15, 16, 17. There's a lot of experts out there, in particular, Justin Herzig, who really kind of beats the drum for week 17 correlation. Where does this fall in line with your structure? And does it change your thought process at all? Do you draft for week 17 correlation in particular, or do you typically look at more weeks, like you said, earlier part of the tournament, and then maybe partly in weeks 15, partly week 16, or are you trying to stack to the max in week 17?
To be honest, that was the whole gig last year, right? Everyone's week 17. People had to memorize, they knew the matchups, everything. And I kind of steered clear of that. Like that wasn't my goal. That wasn't, obviously you want your goal to be, hey, I want to win the $2 million or whatever. See, I go into it more like, hey, I have a personal goal. I want to put this amount of money in, and I want to get an ROI of like 50,000, like, or whatever number it is. And that's kind of how I stuck to it. And there's different ways to accomplish that for me than typically, hey, I'm all in, all or nothing, $2 million. Like, to beat 500,000 people to win that prize is kind of ridiculous. So week 17 was not on my radar as much. I try to incorporate it a lot. I think if you're just a stacker, if you stack quarterbacks with players on their team, that's already giving you week 17. So you don't even have to think about that. And I think where we're saying there's 4 different aspects of this tournament, you break it up in 4s almost, where I think you would rather week 15 to 17 combined. If you wanted to go deeper, I would look at those 3 weeks and kind of look for a strength of schedule, or kind of look at the matchups. Maybe there's teams that have more home games or dome games or whatever. But I think I would combine those weeks, to be honest, and not. And I get why the week 17 thing's a thing. And I'm going to try to get better at it this year, but it wasn't a big part of my game last year. And I think this year, probably maybe like 10% more, I'll look at it. But yeah, I'm not going to go all in on it.
You mentioned Superflex earlier. Let's briefly talk about Superflex. I know it's not your bread and butter, or maybe your favorite to play in, but I assume you still play in some. Do you like to go early quarterback inside Superflex? Do you need a top tier guy in your opinion? And if you miss out on a top tier guy, do you chase it or do you push it? What's your strategy here in Superflex in these best ball streets?
Yeah, so Superflex, I think it's an awesome concept and a fun tournament, and the whole strategy changes. But the reason that it's hard for me is because I get so used to locked in on the traditional leagues and the ADP and everything, and my mind's already adapted to that. And then you just throw out Superflex League to me. I didn't do well on them last year, but this year I'm going to keep trying them. I'm going to try new strategies. And honestly, I think I've done 20 of the fast drafts, and I just entered 130 of the slow ones. So I don't know my strategy yet, but I'm just playing around with it. Half the teams I'm starting off first 4 rounds with like 3 QBs or sometimes, and other ones I'll just take Hurts or Allen, and then I wait and I take like Bryce Young or Kenny Pickett, like 2 of those guys to pair with them. So I don't know. I don't know what's the best way to attack it and to beat it. But I think there's roughly about 20 QBs that I believe in and feel like week 1 could finish the whole season. So I'm focusing more on those. I'm not focusing on like the Falcons guys or Commanders guys and QB situations that are just hard to predict. So I'm not taking late shots on those guys, and maybe I should. So I've seen a lot of people do that as well.
So you mentioned you like 20 quarterbacks. This year, quarterback in particular has really shot up the draft boards, I believe, in part because we saw just a large gap between the top tier and even tier 2, where in the past we've seen a lot closer results from tight end or from quarterback, 5 through quarterback number 18 or 15. And this last year, I should say in particular, that was a very large gap. We had a lot of quarterback uncertainty as well in the beginning of the year, which I also believe led to the rise in the draft ADP into these quarterbacks. What is your take on the price of quarterbacks this year? And do you think that we'll see relief in terms of ADP, or do you think these prices are here to stay?
I think there'll be some relief, and I think more we get drafting, I don't think quarterback's going to win your league, right? Super flex, yes, it's going to win your league, but traditional standard, I don't think it's quite as important. It's going to be more important to hit that probably top 3 wide receiver, and you could pair 2 or 3 quarterbacks later and they could break out, and then you have spike weeks on top of that. So I don't think one QB, just because you have the top QB and you draft him, Josh Allen in the 2nd round, I don't think that's going to guarantee you a win at all. So I'm going to do some of those builds, but obviously I'm going to probably build different. Like last year, Trevor Lawrence was a big target for me. Justin Fields was a big target. Daniel Jones, and those were all late guys. And I usually take shots at about 6, 7, 8 of those guys, and I draft a lot of 3 QB teams, and I'm hoping, half of those guys break out. And usually on my teams, I'll have 2 of those guys in each team. So I'm probably going to wait for the value on them, and it makes sense why they're all up high. But I'm not going to go chase it right now. So.
In your single quarterback drafts, I mean, we just finished the big board,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who are some of your maybe top owned quarterbacks in that tournament?
I should. Let me come back to that.
That was on the fly, not on the show sheet.
No, I'll pull up my ownership on it because no, that's a great question. So I should know it at the top of my head, right? So I'm gonna look at my exposures here. I've drafted 153 teams.
Based on what you said, I'm gonna assume it's like Rodgers and maybe Tannehill and some later values that could potentially outscore their ADP.
Yeah, so okay, I caught the bad side of the Mac Jones news. So right, so he's number one. So he was like a 17th round pick all the time for me.
Yeah.
So he was like a third QB. So he's my top 33%. Kenny Pickett, like I'm really high on the Steelers' value this year. I think Pickett. I know people hate him, and that's why people hated Daniel Jones last year. No one wanted to draft him, and I just think Pickett's like he's the guy I'm just going to take all the time as my QB2. Aaron Rodgers was third, Matthew Stafford 4, CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo. Like these names are gross, right? But I'm usually a 3 QB look for value kind of drafter. So like the top guy Hurts as my top guy, 8% of the elite guys. So I'm not drafting the elite QBs apparently.
The beauty though about Kenny Pickett, and I agree with you, I own quite a bit of Kenny Pickett as well, is when we look at their expected pass play, I mean it's up there. I mean it's above 600 attempts, right? And this is what we want from a quarterback, and we don't expect them to be extremely stout on defense, which they're probably going to be playing from behind a lot in games, and or at least near. It's not going to be commanding large leads, I should say. And so this equates to good fantasy points from a quarterback position, and they're going to be throwing the ball more. And he has weapons, right? He has Deontay Johnson still, who in my opinion is bound to bounce back this year. He has George Pickens, who is just a contested catch monster and is going to continue to develop into an outstanding NFL wide receiver in his sophomore campaign. And then they have Pat Freiermuth inside as an outstanding tight end as well. So you have multiple, skilled positions here that are able to catch the ball. You add in Najee Harris, who is a very capable pass catching back, and they have the weapons to succeed, at least from a Pickett standpoint. And so the offensive line, of course, is the concern, right? If they can get better here on the offensive line. But no, I agree with you. I think that Pickett has been a sneaky play and definitely a value inside these drafts as well.
Yeah. So to me, Bestball is a lot different than redraft, where a lot of people talking right now, they'll have player takes and they'll have like, yeah, Kenny Pickett's awful, But for me, I love hearing those things because for a Bestball volume drafter, I know if I have 20 to 30% of Kenny Pickett, like I am okay with that because the value I'm getting him at later in drafts, he's not my QB1. He's usually my QB2 or QB3. And the way I look at that is these are all tournaments I'm drafting second half of the year. Once he was only a rookie last year, and the Steelers, maybe it takes them half a year coming into this year to kind of get on the same page. And I could see them being like a 500 team where they're fighting for playoff, and he's going to play all those games. And I just think all those Steelers are undervalued. They're my highest owned team. I'm not even like a huge Steelers fan, but I just can't. Every time I'm on the clock, it just feels like there's a Steelers on the board for me. So
we're turning this into a Steelers podcast now. I've Deontay Johnson, I'm a lot higher on versus consensus in my rankings and projections. I mean, we take a look at, he had just the most unlucky year from a touchdown perspective. And if he had just had 4 touchdowns, measly 4, right, I think he'd still be going as a top 24 wide receiver, where most places have him outside the top 30. And I definitely think the amount of targets that he commands inside this offense, he's going to continue to command those targets and is due for some positive touchdown regression. So I agree. I think the Steelers are undervalued. I think all around we can look for a bounce back campaign. We're going to take a quick moment and listen to one of our sponsors.
Hey, it's the Podfather. Now, in the offseason, I get into baseball, I get into basketball, and my preferred platform to play fantasy sports is Rival Fantasy, because Rival Fantasy has challenges where you can just take a guy and say, hey, this guy's going to score more fantasy points than this guy. They put two shortstops together, pick one. Point guards, pick one. Spoiler alert, you should pick Damian Lillard. Or they have the fantasy book, where you can pick over, under, and up to 5 guys, and then the more you pick, your potential payout quickly escalates. And finally, I submit a bingo card, because you can just go over, under across the board, get your fantasy bingo card set, submit it. I'm not the biggest basketball or baseball expert, but I have a hell of a lot of fun playing fantasy sports on rivalfantasy.com. And the best part is, with promo code PLAYER, they refund up to $50 of any losses. So the promo code there is PLAYER on rivalfantasy.com. Go have some fun.
That's right. Get out there and have some fun playing Rival. It's a fun platform. You know what else is fun? Is sitting here talking and debating more roster construction. We talked about it earlier. This is a huge part of Bestball, because I believe that quarter of the room typically eliminates themselves in the draft based upon poor roster construction. What do I mean by poor roster construction? You'll see teams that go out there and go 5 quarterbacks, 2 or 3 running backs at times, and they just seem like they're lost inside the draft room. What is your ideal construction from a positional standpoint? Are you a 3-6-8-3 guy? Are you a 4-6-8-2 guy? Which way do you like to go? How many quarterbacks do you typically like to take in a best ball, non-Superflex? How many running backs do you typically like to take? How many wide receivers do you like to take? And how many tight ends do you like to take? I know you're a volume drafter, so I know you're going to say it varies and you're going to get all over the place. But if you were only doing 10 of these, which way do you lean?
So are you saying 20 rounds or 18 rounds?
Let's do 20. Did I count 18 or what I count?
No, I think you did 20. Yeah.
That was off the top of my head. I was just spewing numbers.
No. So, and we're talking tournaments here, right? We're not talking any cash games or anything like that, right?
Absolutely. Tournaments, yes.
It's always tournaments, right? We're just...
You're going for $2 million.
Yeah, we're
10
just
teams. How are you building it?
If I'm in the tournament, probably, I was going to say it depends, but I would say 80%. 80% I'm probably doing 3-6-8-3. So
okay. And why? Yeah. I want to hear the why.
I think it sets you up for some nice combos. If you only going in there with 2 QBs, you're kind of limited. One of those guys gets hurt, they have a bad game, whatnot, and usually if you're going 3 QBs, you're usually trying to stack them, so you have a 1 in 3 chance of that team going off that week. So I kind of like that angle of it. I like it's a little bit safe. You never really want to be safe in these tournaments, but it kind of is a safety. I think it's a value thing too, where if I'm going 3 and I know I'm going 3 tight ends, I don't have to push those positions. I know we talk about you want a balanced roster when you're drafting best ball, like that comes up a lot. But I also think you have to sacrifice at some positions. And for me, it's always the 1C positions. And I always feel like later in drafts, I can get a better tight end or a QB later. So those ones, like, I'll wait on, and I'm not afraid to get a third one on both of them. And then that sets you up for, pretty balanced at running back, 6, whatever you want to do. If you want to go early at it, or if you want to, just 0 running back strategy there, 8 wide receivers, I think is more than enough. Like, I know there was a couple of years where everyone was wanting 10, 11 wide receivers, and they were the guys that were going to get you the spike weeks. But if you get 3 top wide receivers, wide receiver doesn't get quite as injured as much either. So I think you're kind of okay. So that, I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's kind of my approach, just top of my head. But obviously every draft you go in, the draft board's going to shift and you're going to have to adapt as you go. And that's kind of the beauty of it. There's no set way to do it.
Okay. Now curveball, 18 rounds. How are you adjusting?
18, kind of similar, where I'm going to go, if I go QB early, I'm going to stick with 2. If I wait at QB probably till like round 10, I'm probably going 3. Same with tight end. Like if I'm getting a tight end in the top 10 rounds, I'm probably only going to get one more and go with 2 and 3 QBs. So what's that? It's 5. So then I'll go with, we got 13 left. So I'll probably go 6 running backs and 7 receivers. So
Okay.
do 2, 6, 7, 3, or 3, 6, 7, 2.
Now, do you think it is wise, or I guess which way do you lean? If you're skinny at quarterback, do you feel the need to go 3 tight ends, or if you're skinny at tight end, do you feel the need to go 3 quarterbacks? Are you comfortable going skinny at both and loading up at running back and receiver, or is it completely dependent upon who you are selecting at those 2 positions?
I think if you invest draft capital in QB and tight end, I think you can go 2 of each, and that's fine. And then you just kind of fill out what we'd probably go 6 and 8, 6 running backs, 8 receivers, and then 2 at each of the other ones. So I think that's kind of a standard build too. A lot of people do. It's not my preferred, really. I don't know. I think a lot of people saw last year, and I think a lot of the data that came out actually was more balanced teams were better. Like they made it to the finals. And the years before, it was like, hey, 3, 4 running backs, that's all you need to draft. And then because you're only going for that top prize. And if you get one in there in the finals, like you're golden, because then you have 10, 11, 12 receivers. But yeah, there's a lot of ways, and I think every year is a little different. So I don't know what the correct way is. I think I would do a little bit of both.
Let's talk about ceiling and floor. So you mentioned floor earlier. You mentioned the ceiling earlier as well. Are you drafting 100% for ceiling? Do you consider the floor when you're drafting, or are you just only shooting for the top prize, the $2 million, or are you mixing in builds here that are typically safer than maybe your moonshots?
I'm trying to not play it safe, and the way I've kind of accustomed and built that out myself is, I think last year I did a lot better at it. The year before, I just like broke even year. Last year was a lot better for me, and it was, you know what? I'm not going to draft any old guys. Like I almost treat my best.
Ageist you.
Yeah, no, I almost treat my best ball drafts now just as like a dynasty draft startup, to be honest, because I think it's an easy way to do it where their tournaments and the later rounds and the playoff rounds. So even these younger guys, they're going to have more opportunity later in the season. That's where you're going to get your breakouts, and those are the ceiling players. Like last year, I remember like everyone was on like Julio Jones. What a value, blah, 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 blah. It's like, I don't care if I got him in the 18th round. I do not want him. And then he went up to like the 8th round or whatever because he had Tom Brady. It's like, I don't want those kind of players. So any player that's, I hate to say the age thing. Also, like injury, if you're coming off an injury, like I am not going to draft you unless you fall like 2 rounds. Just a lot things like that I've learned. But definitely,
What's your age limit? Where do you cut the cap? Like your senior discount? What's that line?
Just chasing ceiling, like we said, right? So I want players. I want players in year 2 to 5. Like if I could build a whole team, a whole best ball team with just that age group, and I'm talking mainly running back and wide receiver, quarterback, obviously different. Tight end too. It's like tight end to me does not matter. Like I'm a 0 tight end guy. So I do not care about tight end at all. Like I will draft a whole team and draft my last 3 picks tight ends. I could care less.
Man, now I want to go out and build this this dusty team just to do it. I want to go out and build like everybody over 30 and see how far it goes. Let's try to think of every player we can, like round 1 through round 18 that's going to be dusty, and to see if we can build this like senior citizen roster and see how far we can take it.
I'm gonna challenge accepted. I'll do that, and I'll screenshot it over to
you. So round one, was it Devontae Adams? Is he's the oldest one in round one? Kelsey would be, right?
Yeah, you're probably going Kelsey. Yep.
Let's go round two. Who's the oldest in round two? Is it trying to think off the top of my head, man? This is tough actually without having the ages in front of you. Now I want to do it. I'm going to do it too. We should do it. Let's each build a Dusty team.
Look at now I don't want to look at ADP, right? So see where we're at. But yeah, for like round two, I don't know who you'd be in on.
Oh man, it's probably a running back.
Derrick Henry, maybe.
Yeah, there we go. And then round three is probably another. Oh, you could probably it's either Henry or you could probably go receiver. There's some older receivers going too. Oh man, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be a new. I'm definitely gonna do this. All right.
If you finish like higher and if you can finish higher than fifth in your league, like I'd be shocked.
I'm gonna track it. I'm definitely gonna do it. All right. So we talked earlier about correlation. Are you a stacker or are you not a stacker, just in general?
I've grown into it a little bit. I have never really been all stack or die kind of guy. So I haven't been on the clock and hey, who's my quarterback? Who's my receiver? Where are the other pieces right now? Like, let me put them in my queue, like that hasn't been me. But that's part of my game that I want to get a little bit better at. I don't think, obviously it probably helps your percentage a little bit, but when I'm drafting just hundreds or thousands of teams, to me, that doesn't matter quite as much. It's definitely more about the volume and the different combos that I can get. But my number one thing's always about value, like where I can get guys and build my portfolio that way. So I'm always looking for value. But stacking, yes, I got a little bit better at it last year. I was kind of more like, hey, week 17, I stayed away from that. It's like, I'm going to do the stacking instead and get better at that. And that's going to be my week 17. If it's a Texan stack, whatever, I don't care. So.
We don't have the schedule yet, but when we do have the schedule and it comes out, how close attention do you pay to bye weeks?
I've been playing Bestball probably 6-7 years, and that was probably the first, 2 to 3 years me doing it. I always needed that schedule, and it's something that was very important to me then. I've grown that it's not as important anymore, but obviously the onesie positions or your star players, like I don't want 3 of those guys on the same bye week. So that's going to be, if I'm on the clock, that's going to be an easy decision. Hey, I'm going to take this guy instead. That's going to help my decisions. But I think it's important. I think one thing that's missed a lot in Bestball is, people. I talked about injuries. Like I don't like to draft injured players. I don't like to draft older players because I think they're kind of in line to get injured or cut or their career's over just like that. So I taught myself to never try to take a 0 in Bestball. Like I never want to take a 0, and I don't know if that's a dumb way to do it but I want to look at every week, all 17 weeks, and I never want to have a 0 at any position. And I think that just sets you up. And I think even week 1, like I want to draft a team where I have 18 players. I want 18 players on week 1, and that sets me up for weeks 17 to actually have a chance where maybe out of those 18 players, maybe I have 12, 13, 14 live players still walking. So that's always how I looked at it. If I started draft and I draft Joe Mixon and I draft Alvin Kamara and I draft all these guys with question marks, it hurts your value. Like it hurts your team right from the start. And obviously, okay, yeah, playoff weeks, these guys could hit huge and you're getting a value on them. But at the same time, it's a long season, and yeah, I'd rather just take more upside shots, and even if it's not such a high ceiling on players. So,
okay, how about handcuffing? Do you typically like to lean towards handcuffing in Bestball? Are you against it? I know in season long it's a lot different. People like to take a handcuff, but what is your thought process with Bestball?
So a handcuff, are you talking both, take like both backs, both running
Yeah,
back
so,
from
like,
the same
last year
team?
would have been, like, Hunt and Chubb, right? Or,
Yeah.
do you stray away from it? Do you lean into it? What's your opinion on this one?
Yeah, it's always one that people say, this is the first rule of best ball or first rule of fantasy football, right? Don't take both backs, you're limiting yourself. I honestly think it's okay. Like I've took teams where I took 6 running backs and I've took, two three pairs of 2 running backs from the same team. Like last year, you could take Singletary and James Cook, and then like every team you could do a Swift and Jamal Williams, and like it's a good fine strategy. Obviously you're not going to reach at it, and it's usually going to happen if they kind of fall to you, kind of how your build goes. But I think it's an underrated strategy, to be honest. Uh, I think it's going to allow you to like what the good one last year was Penny and Kenneth Walker. You take both those guys, and I think they were ninth, like 8th to 10 rounds, right? Both of them. So really, if we only knew one of them was going to be the running back, like this year, Kenneth Walker, what is he, a 3rd round pick, 2nd round pick?
Second round pick.
Because there's no other running back there. But you put Penny back on that team, and then they're going to kind of split. So one of those guys goes down, and you have a top 5 running back just like that. So I think and Penny was good to start of the year, so he gave you a few good weeks as well. So things like that. But I don't think you should take a running back in the first maybe 3 rounds and then get his handcuff in like round 10 or 12. But if you're taking 2 running backs and they're both after round 6 or 7, I think it's a great strategy.
Okay.
And I think like what's the one? I think the Bears is a fun one this year. Like
Yep.
Herbert and Foreman. Like
Yep.
that's definitely one people should be taking. I think the Lions, like Montgomery and Swift, like that's too cheap. Like those are fun ones. And they're younger teams, and they're teams that kind of might break out. So that's what I'm looking for also. Like I want good teams and teams that could break out. So yeah, I think it's an underrated strategy. I think not the numbers aren't going to show that's a good strategy, but I think it's going to help you along the way.
Okay. In addition to player projections, how much do you weigh contingent value? And so, what do I mean by contingent value? So, let's just say that player X. Let's use player X as Madison. Let's talk about Madison. So, you want Alex Madison. The cost is a compromise between a standalone projection, right? Because we know that he's, as of today, not the lead running back inside of this Minnesota Vikings offense. However, his projection would change if Dalvin Cook were to be injured or cut, released, traded, you name it. How much do you weigh contingent value when you're doing best ball drafts?
I think you have to. I think you want to take those chances. You want to get ahead of the curve. And as a volume drafter, I want to find those edges. And then say after the draft, the Vikings, maybe they trade Cook or cut Cook, or they draft another running back. So then Madison's value is going to change completely, and maybe it's up or maybe it's down. Like I don't think it's going to go down. Like he's still going to be a value, especially in best ball. Like he's going to help your team no matter what. He's not too expensive right now, so he's definitely a guy you would want as your running back 4 or 5 on your team. He's definitely going to be a guy that I target, and I have been targeting. Even if his price goes up 2 more rounds, I'm okay with it before I know exactly what the news is in Minnesota on their backfield. So I think it's a great way to get ahead of the curve. I think also like free agency and the rookies, like the free agents and rookies, those are what you kind of want to do the same with, right? You want to predict depth charts and things like that. So it's definitely a smart. It's definitely going to get you ahead. It's going to find you some values, but you're going to land on a bunch of landmines as well. Like you're going to miss on some, and that's okay. It's as long as you're taking a player that's going to play, even if they're second on the depth chart, it's not a bad deal.
So I've asked a lot of questions today. Is there anything that you would like to share, just in general of strategy for best ball, that I missed that you would like to share?
Yeah, did we go over all the questions, huh?
We did. Yeah.
Just like that, whip through them. Yeah. I mean, I just see the state of Bestball. It's growing. It's fun. It's there's a lot of content out there right now, and we're just right after the Super Bowl. People it's giving guys stuff to talk about now. So we can draft teams, and we can try to predict. We can just have fun with it. And there's a ton of money up top on these. What the Superflex right now was 100,000 first, or is it 200,000?
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. I know it's a decent amount.
Yeah, 100,000. So yeah, it's hard not to play that for $10, right? Even in the middle of April. So it's kind of fun. And who knows, after the NFL draft, what Underdog's going to release, what other sites are going to release out there. So apparently people have unlimited money and just want to keep entering these contests.
Well, James, always a pleasure to talk with you. I appreciate you coming on the show. Why don't you tell the listeners where to find you and what you're listening on or what you're working on?
Yeah, I'm at Football Guys, doing Bestball content there. So we just released the Bestball guide just this past week. So we're really excited about that. If you're a beginner, I mean, first 20 pages, it's gonna really kind of outline what you have to do. And then there's a lot of strategy pieces in there that I put. I wrote a bunch of those. Like, I don't think there's any exact way to draft a Bestball team. So I think that's the beauty of it. And that's what I'd encourage others to kind of feel that for themselves and to get an understanding of that. So yeah, check that out. It's free. I think it costs you an email address. So if you want to check that out, I think it has a link to our rankings and like a CSV also. So if you want to just click on that and load in your rankings on the Underdog, you can do that. What else? Yeah, just on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, so I'm always open. Like, if you have a Bestball question, you can DM me or just send me a message on there. I usually try to always engage and talk back there. I love to learn from everyone else out there. I listen to all these Bestball podcasts. I love the live streams. I'm just still trying to learn. I'm just trying to grow. I'm trying to be a better player. I'm trying to look at new strategies. And I'm just kind of enjoying it and making friends as we do it, right? So yeah, you need anything, yeah, just check me out on Twitter. So
well, everybody, you can follow him at Twitter at James Brimacombe. That is Brimacombe for the audio listeners. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights on Bestball. Again, you can find him in the Bestball streets. He is Eagles. I'm sure you'll see him. There's not many draft rooms that you can enter that he is not in. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next week with the Podfather himself on the Dominator, and I'll be back recording on Wednesday, Man vs. Machine with Dario with our projection debate, and then next Thursday in First Class Fantasy with Theo Grimminger and Jared Smola from Draft Shark. So thanks for tuning in. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out playerprofiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.